Today is June 1st, 2000, and we're at the home of Barbara Auldrich at Higgins Lake. And this is Carol Garlow, and we're going to do an oral history with Mrs. Auldrich for the Roscommon Area Historical Society. Now I'd like you to just say that this will belong to the Roscommon Area Historical Society.
This will belong to the Roscommon Historical Society.
Good. I think, no, you don't have to
You don't
hang
have
on
to
to
hold
that.
it. Okay.
No. It should
Okay.
just record. We'll
Okay.
see. Well, let's start with when you were born, and then tell us about your parents, okay? Because you're a real native.
Yes, but I was born down in Dolph Township. I don't know if you know anything about that. That's in Osaukee County.
Oh, okay.
That was in the south end of the lake, I guess, and on down, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
The south end of Houghton Lake?
mhm.
Okay.
And so
What year were you born?
in 1910,
Okay.
on the 4th day of February,
Oh, and how many were in your family when you were,
I had one brother.
were you the,
One brother was born before I was.
okay.
My folks were married, I think in 1906, 7. And then they were married a year and had Harold, or Leonard.
Mhm.
And then 2 years and 5 months, I guess, was I was
Okay,
born
Barbara.
after that.
Okay, let's continue with your siblings. Who came after you?
Well, then my brother Ben.
And your maiden name was, what was your mother, dad's name?
William and Alice Apps. William Apps. William Levi Apps. And Alice May Hancock Apps.
Okay, great. Okay, and there was,
And I had my brother, in 1915, my brother Ben was born. And then goodness,
24, Harold.
oh yeah, but
Is there another one before that?
wasn't there one before that?
Doesn't say.
Well, then that must be Harold. He was born in 21, you say?
24.
24. And he was killed in the Second World War. He was drafted right out of high school.
Oh.
They had to fill their quota,
Uh-huh.
and he was drafted.
Oh,
And he was killed in the war.
okay. Okay, well, let's go back to your childhood then. You were born and your folks were, at that time, where they worked, what kind of work was your father doing?
He was cutting timber. My grandfather and had oh dear, what do you call it? You contract to take this, to have this timber. What in the world? He
Well, you'll think of it later.
he asked for 160 acres of ground, and then grandmother
Like you
Ask-
homesteaded?
asked, yeah, homestead, another 160 acres, so they had a big, and it was heavily timbered, and so my father cut the timber, and with Grandpa and the rest of them,
Then was that his father and mother or her father and mother?
his father and mother.
His father.
Mhm. My mother's mother had died when my mother was 13.
Oh.
She had cancer.
Way back then, huh?
Way back then. And then my mother went and lived with her oldest brother and his wife.
Oh.
Then she was married to my father when she was 14.
Oh my gosh.
I can't imagine it. You know, she had 2 children when she was 17.
Something, isn't it?
Isn't that something? And when she had a stepfather, and they broke up the housekeeping because he didn't feel that it was right for him to live with the daughter of his wife. You know, he felt that.
Sure.
So they broke up housekeeping, and she had 2 cows and some, I guess, furnitures and things like that was given to her by her father, her stepfather. And then she married my father, and when she was 14, he was 19. They were awfully young.
I guess so.
And then she had my brother Leonard, and after they were married just about a year when he was born. And then 2 years and 5 months I was born. And then in 1915, my brother Ben was born. And Bill was born. I've forgotten when he was born.
Okay, we didn't have him on the list.
Oh, didn't I?
That's why we missed him.
Isn't that something? And he
Yeah.
just died here when I was in Florida. I didn't.
Oh,
So I haven't been to see his wife yet. I've talked to her on the phone, but they live in Illinois.
oh.
Mhm. So Martha and I are planning to go
Well, that will be nice.
for a while, you know,
Sure.
visit her. So
So Harold was the youngest?
yes,
Okay.
and
Okay, let's get back to your father that was working
in the lumbering.
cutting the lumber
Cutting
that
lumber.
belonged to his parents.
And his brother set up a mill, so they could also make lumber, you know, as well as the timber.
Okay.
And they used to take it to Vogel Center. That's over towards Marion.
What do you call it, Logan?
Vogel.
Oh, Vogel, V-O-G-E-L, okay.
I think it was German, perhaps. I don't know for sure. And but then when I was 6 years old, my father went into a camp, started running a lumber camp, and moved us all right into it. My mother and father and my
Oh,
2 brothers and myself. Ben was a baby then.
I
And-
guess so.
So, I don't know. I guess we were there 1 year, and Dad had had a very good year. He made some money and everything. So that, of course, summer was nothing. You know, there was nothing to do. So we went to Ionia. My mother's sister lived there, and she had a family, and Uncle Joe Loper was her husband's name. He worked at a reed factory. They made reed furniture.
Oh.
And so my father thought he would go down there and do that. And but the factory was slowed down for the summer. I don't know, they weren't
Oh.
producing so much, so he didn't get a job. So we stayed for the summer, and then we had to get back for school. And we went back to the same camp.
Now, that was the Mickelson? That was for Mickelson?
That was for
Lumber Company?
Mickelson.
Okay.
And where you go over here to go on to 27,
On the north side of the lake? Okay.
just beyond that was where my father's first camp was.
Oh,
And so, and we kids had to go to the camp, or to the township that the camp was on, or where he was cutting timber on. And so we had to go to several different schools if you know, when you
As they
moved from
moved,
one camp
sure.
to another. So it was always easy for me, but my brother was very introverted, and it was just almost so difficult for him to go to a new school, you know.
Sure.
And
Do you remember the name of the first school you went to?
Yeah, the first school I think I went to was Marquee.
Oh, okay.
And
Then when you were at Mickelson Camp, what school did you go to there?
well, that depended on the township, as I said. And we went to Marquee, and we went to Lyon Manor, and then we'd have to shift back to Marquee.
Okay, I'm gonna check this.
When I was 9 years old, that was at the finish of the First World War,
Oh,
and
sure.
we had a terrible flu epidemic, and I had the flu, and I went. But after I was well, I went out. My cousin and I, she lived next door, and sat in an old buggy out there, and of course it was snow in it and everything, but we had coats, and we thought we were fine. The next morning, I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't lift my head. I had spinal meningitis,
Oh,
and that was February, and I was April or May before I got over it. My folks, we had a doctor, but he was a new doctor and a young man, and he wasn't too well trained, I don't think, for the position.
do you remember his name?
It was Snyder. And he was from Houghton Heights. And so then finally my father and mother moved me to Mickelson, because we were in camp then, and moved me to Mickelson, and my father got the doctor from Lake City that had been our family doctor, Dr. Dowdna, and he came, and this doctor said I had meningitis of the nerves, and neuritis of the nerves is what he called it. And then, so when Dowdna came, he knew it was spinal meningitis, and so he,
Oh, Dr. Snyder had called it neuritis.
mhm.
Okay.
And so he gave me medication. In 5 days I was able, I hadn't been able to eat or anything, you know, I was just getting so skinny and everything. And so I was able to eat, and I began to recover, so. But they wouldn't let me go to school for a year, because he said I was too, it had been too much for me. So, of course, with my younger brother, he wasn't in school yet at that time, and
You had fun.
so we had, yeah, and he loved playing with paper dolls the same as I did, you know. And we'd
Sure.
play with paper dolls and have a grand time, you know. My older brother, he thought we were a couple sissies, you know.
Sure.
But so then when I guess when I went back to school, Ben was able to go because he was old enough then. But I always was looking after him, because I thought people would pick on him, you know. And Leonard wasn't too happy with him. He was jealous. So anyway, but we made it. And then in, I can't remember what year that was, but we went to live on this farm, because this woman had died, and she had some cattle and things there that needed attention. So we went to live on the Tracy farm.
Oh, that's down in 1922. First you went to the Auldrich camp.
Well, that was one of the camps that we lived in, and when Father started in there on that side of the lake, you know.
And that was after you had been at Mickelson's camp. Then you went to Auldrich's camp.
But still, his timber went to Mickelson.
Oh, I see.
Hmm. So then,
Then in 20 and 21, you built a camp?
yes, my father built a camp. That was between the Auldrich camp and beyond our camp that he built was people by the name of Heislips had a camp there that they were running.
Okay, where are we?
We're on
I'm lost.
on the
Are we still on the north end of Higgins Lake?
mm,
When you say Auldrich Camp?
no, the Auldrich. Let me see. I have to think about where that was. Anyway, well, if you don't know the country out that way though, so it wouldn't-
Not too much, but
Mhm.
but on which side of the lake are you?
We're
Are
on
you?
the east side of the lake.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. We're on the east side of the lake, and so then all of the timber was put into the lake and went down the river to the mill. You see.
Into the Cut River,
Mhm.
down to the,
Down
oh,
to-
where was the
Mis-
mill then?
No, at Mickelson went to the on the Muskegon River.
Oh, so
Mhm.
were you on the east side of Houghton Lake?
Mm-hmm.
Not Higgins?
On Higgins, that's right. I guess it was Houghton.
Houghton,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Mm-hmm. So.
Get me in the right county anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Isn't that terrible?
Well, it's the camps apparently didn't stay there
We didn't.
real long, then you moved on to another one, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's hard to remember all that.
If they cut off all
Once
the
they-
timber, by
mhm.
then they had to move to a different
The next
area.
phase.
Mm-hmm.
That
So.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you were telling us about your mother and father before you went to Tracy's place, Art Tracy.
Mhm.
You had been at the mounds, and
Yeah.
can you tell us about that?
That was an Indian mounds. That's on the north side of Houghton Lake, and it was an old Indian mound, and my father and mother worked there. Mother cooked, and Dad kept the yards cleaned and helped to keep clean.
Did you live in the hotel, your family?
Mm-hmm. We had rooms in the hotel.
Do you remember the name of it?
Mm.
Or how big was it?
It was a good sized
Like
building.
2 stories, or?
Two-story building, and the people's name was McCoy. But and they ran the hotel for quite a while.
And was that on the lake? Did you go
Mhm.
swimming all the time? Well, you had a good time.
I didn't go swimming there
Oh.
very much, but I used to go with Mrs. McCoy when she would go to change rooms, you know.
Oh,
Sometimes
sure.
she had another building, and so I'd go with her to help make beds and things. And she was very interesting. They lived out at Higgins Lake years later,
Oh.
and I don't know, they sold the place to someone. I don't know who took it then, you know. But it was interesting
But the families remained friends
for a while.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's nice.
And then, but then we often,
So that was just a summer job for your
Mhm.
father
Mhm.
and mother, okay.
Dad raised a garden. They just thought that was the most wonderful garden because he'd have fresh lettuce, you know, and all the nice.
Oh,
And
sure.
And they just thought that was the most wonderful thing.
So the McCoys had a restaurant for their guests with the hotel?
Yeah, they had
Mhm.
a dining hall.
Mhm.
Mhm. And they had a, I can't remember that, colored lady that worked. I can't remember if her name was, seems as though it was Gilliam. But But anyway, my dad was always joking, and she and Dad would get laughing, you know. And while they were serving breakfast, she didn't want any noise out of that kitchen to go to disturb the dining room, you know. And those people were, some of them were from the city, you know, and they were, so,
But it's a happy memory for you.
mm-hmm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And, so then, I don't remember where we went after that.
Well, then you were gonna tell us about Art Tracy's place.
Oh, we moved to Art Tracy's place. That was, we rented the house. It was, he wasn't using it or anything. It was a nice place. It had porches almost all the way around it. And,
Okay, where is that place? Where was that place?
that was in Markey, in Markey Township, I think. And, or Markey. And, I don't remember. I guess it was just a place to live. And, my father was, then we hadn't been there long when this lady died. And, then they wanted, the administrator, he was from Roscommon. His name was Ed Houghton. You may have heard of him in some of your searchings. And, so he asked my father and mother to go and live there to look after the cattle and things. And, so we did. And,
So Art Tracy's place was a farm.
mm-hmm. And then her place was a farm also, Mrs. Tracy's farm.
The mother-in-law, his mother, you mean?
His mother.
Okay.
Mhm. And so, we went from his place to this other farm. You see, it was probably only a mile and a half away apart. It wasn't that distant. And then we kids went to school there, of course. And then I think shortly after that, didn't we, that we went to Frederick?
Yes, 1923.
Mm-hmm. Because, well, my father was working on the road, and they were graveling Old 27. It was called M18 back then. And when they got to Frederick, the weather was freezing. It was in December, and so their gravel would be all frozen. So they had to quit. And but my father had evidently went into some of the buildings there and found out that they were cutting hardwood for pulp. And so we moved up to Frederick at that time, and this lady at Markey had died, and she had 2 daughters and a son. The son was in between the oldest girl, and then was about my age, and the youngest one I think was 5, and the boy was 7. And my mother had helped look after her when she was bedfast, and I don't know what was the cause of her death, but anyway, Mother helped them out, and so he asked if Mother and Dad would take the children if we'd. So we took the children, and when we moved to Frederick, they moved with us, and he moved with us, and then he got a little house there up on a hill back of us, and so he and the family could live by themselves, but they were still living or working with us, you know. And I know that summer, it was a wonderful summer, and we had a car, and
Was that your family's first car? Your father's first car?
the first car, a Model T,
Oh, how
old Model T.
exciting.
And we started picking huckleberries, and they were just tremendous places where the huckleberries were just wonderful, you know. And my dad would take a half bushel basket and a picker, and he didn't put the berries back in the picker. He just swept them into this basket. And of course, he had a lot of brush and everything. So then, if there was a breeze, why he could hold them up and breeze would take the dirt out. But otherwise, somebody had to fan it while he poured them, you know. And but there was one time with Mr. Cohn with us and everything, and the kids didn't go. They evidently stayed in camp and or at home. But we went with our folks, and one time my dad had a rack built on the back of this old Model T that he could set these baskets on, these half bushel baskets, and we'd go into Grayling with these berries. People by the name of King was buying the berries. We went in several times with 8 or 9 bushels of berries.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That was how thick they were, you know. And of course, Mr. Cohn was picking the same as Dad was, you know. And Leonard was, I think he was picking. I know my mother picked by hand, and hers were put into quart boxes, and a half bushel was 16 of these quarts, and a bushel was 32 of these quarts, and so Mother got more for the hand-picked ones because they were sold on the streets in Bay City or stores and things.
They were nice and clean, too.
Nice and clean, you know. Yes, they were, you know, choice berries. And so she got special pay for them. And
Do you remember how much it was? By any chance?
I think probably $2 or $3 a bushel. I can't remember
That's
exactly.
what other people have said they would get $2 or $3 a bushel.
Mm-hmm. So
Mr. Cohn, is that Kohn or Cone?
C-O-H-N.
Cohn.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know what ever became of those people. I did see the girl, the oldest girl. I kept in touch with her a while.
Oh, that was nice.
And I think she was living, I know she was living in Saginaw, I think, an aunt. And they'd gotten straightened around so that they were better taken care of, you know, or had better opportunities to go to school and that sort of thing. So
Did you stay a school year up there in Frederick, or was that just for the summer?
Oh no, we lived there.
Oh, okay.
We lived there. Quite. We'd come down sometimes to Higgins Lake for the summer, and my mother worked in a rest or a hotel, in at the lake, and my father would build houses.
Oh.
And he built several houses in Alameda Beach.
Was that in the 20s also?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because then it says in 24 and 25 you went to Mansalona Crossing Camp.
That was a camp.
During the winter then?
That was on the river, the Mansalona River.
Oh.
And that was 12 miles out of Frederick.
Oh.
And we went out there, and we'd gotten a different car. And my brother was able to drive. And so we were going to drive into town this 12 miles for school. And of course we got a snowstorm, and nobody left the camp for school.
Oh.
So there was a year that I was home,
Oh.
and he was too, so.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that something?
You had a year off because it snowed too much.
Mm-hmm. So then I went back to school, and the teacher I had was determined that I should keep up with my class, so she had me skip a grade,
Oh,
and I got along just fine. So of course I
well,
was
good.
always listening to someone else and copying them if I had to.
Sure.
You know, remembering what they said. So, but my brother quit school when he was 16 because he was so, being with other, different places together was just awfully hard for him.
Mm-hmm. Not for everybody, huh?
In the last few years, he was much better. He worked for Frosty Wyckoff here in
Oh.
Roscommon.
Did he?
Mm-hmm. And got so he met and worked the till. Of course, he was good at math and things. And he worked the till and everything. He was almost a manager there,
Great.
which I felt was really remarkable, you know, for the way he started out. He'd be so enthused. He was always wanting something, and he'd write to these people. I don't know where he got some of the stuff, but if he sold salve, so much salve he could get a prize, you know.
Oh.
Or if he sold pictures and all of this sort of thing, he'd get these silly things, and then I was the one that sold them.
And who received the prize?
He got the prize. Isn't that funny?
Uh-huh. When you lived at these lumber camps, what do you remember about the place you lived in? Like, did you have a bunkhouse kind of place?
Yeah.
Or did your family have their own dwelling separate from everybody else at the camp?
Usually we had, our quarters were part of the dining room.
Oh, okay.
See, and
So it was a fairly large
a
building.
long building. Mm-hmm. And because I know the chore boy would come in at 5 o'clock and start the fires, and then right after that, Mother was up and getting things going because she fried side pork or stuff like that, and or even pork chops, and made pancakes and everything for those men because they really ate like men.
Like, how many would she cook for?
Oh, usually there were in a big crew, like 6 or 8 or something like that, maybe 10.
And you were the only ones that had your whole family there?
Mm-hmm.
Because she was the
Well,
cook.
well, my aunt and uncle moved into a little, it's been called the office, but it was big enough to have bedrooms, and they had 2 children, and they moved in there, and it was nice having someone, and then the kids went to school with us, you know, and everything.
Now, that was at which camp were we talking
That was
about?
that was at the Auldrich camp.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And
Did any of the Auldriches live there?
no,
No.
we never had. Well, I guess Dad had seen some of the family because we used to get hay from them for the horses, you know. And
Where did they live?
they lived on the farm.
Which was,
Uh,
how far from the camp was that?
Oh, probably 2 or 3 miles.
Oh, nearby
Mhm.
then.
Wasn't so far. Mhm. And they haul the hay over. Most generally, they'd haul it over, or Dad would have to have somebody go and get it, you know. So we never was allowed to be out when the men were out with the horses because Dad was afraid we might frighten the horses. And kids, you know, spook horses, so. And we could never, my brother couldn't go to the men's shanty unless Dad would warn him that he was coming so they wouldn't be swearing him. Because Mother was very firm about that, you know.
Good for her.
Yes, she was. She was very strict. And
Did your family go to any church when you were doing all this moving around?
no, never had. Mother had the Bible, and I know that she read it, and when I was sick, why, she and Dad always said that it was the Lord that saved me because I was sick for so long and everything. But and Dad had
So
been
you
raised.
learned the Bible from her.
And my mother had 12 children, and they'd lost one child.
Who had 12 children?
My father's mother and father.
Oh, your father's.
And
Wow.
and Grandma had read the Bible with those kids, and it was just remarkable how they had always had known about the Bible
Had strong faith.
and had lots of faith, strong faith. And yet there was some of them that did capers that they shouldn't have done, like all families.
For sure.
So I guess people wouldn't be normal if they didn't.
That's right. That's for sure.
So it was interesting.
Okay, so we left. You were in Frederick, and then you
Mhm.
went this summer to Higgins Lake. Says in 25.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the fall you went to Lovell's.
Yeah, Dad didn't have a place to work, and so this man asked him to go and run this camp. So we went to Lovell's, and we were in the camp. I think in December we had to move into Lovell's because my mother was expecting, and she didn't want to be seen pregnant in front of men. That was big.
Oh, really?
It wasn't proper.
Uh-huh.
And so we moved into Lovell's, and I don't know who Dad got to cook. He got someone to cook at the camp.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you remember who we worked for at that camp?
He's from Grayling. His name was Lovely. I can't remember his first name.
The last name was
Lovely.
Lovely. Okay.
I think the first name seems like it was Tom, but I can't be sure.
Uh-huh. Well, that's okay.
And he was a very nice man to work with. Dad liked him very much. And when we were in camp and Mother was cooking, as I got older, I used to. They used to have gloves and different things that men would want from town,
Mm-hmm.
and so they used to stock up on some of those things, and I used to keep track of the store of these
Wow.
things, so.
Good for you. That
them.
was fun, huh?
Mhm. So it could be taken from their
Paycheck?
wages.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. So
Neat. So your father really would have acted like a manager
Mhm.
or a foreman.
Oh, yeah,
at
he
all these
was.
camps.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
he was a very intelligent man
Mhm.
and very capable. He, I think he'd only had probably a 8th grade education was all he had.
Mhm.
I know Mother didn't have. She was always very conscious that she hadn't had a good education.
Formal, mhm.
And I've just been so angry with her sometimes, not really angry, but disappointed because she would never, no matter how much she used that Bible, she never marked in it. And the same way with her school books. I had some books of hers, and she never made a mark in one of those books. And I thought, if she only knew what it would meant to me for her to have done that,
Uh-huh. But I think that, don't you think that they, what would be the word, revered the books and
Mhm.
didn't want to
Spoil them.
deface
Didn't-
them?
That's right. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a-
even the Bible, she didn't want them, and of course mine, I have bookmarks and everything else in it, besides the markings.
Mhm. Well, that's good. It
And
was well used, huh?
So, yes, I got,
Then you went to school in Lovell's then. By then you were 15 or
I-
17 or so.
I didn't go to school in Lovells.
Oh, you didn't?
No, because I was up to
You were
into
finished?
high school.
Oh, okay.
And they had no high school there. They just, so my brother went to school. And my mother was expecting, who in the world?
Bill.
Bill. And so we had done, it was.
So you were helping her with the,
Yeah, and on Monday we were doing the washing, and we were just wiping up the kitchen floor where we'd spilled water. And the water broke on her, and the train only come out twice a week, and the train hadn't gone back to Grayling yet. So Mother had to get on that train and go to Grayling.
oh my gosh.
She went and lived with Mrs. LaChapelle. Her husband was worked at the depot
Oh.
at Grayling.
Mhm.
And so Mother was there and had my brother there.
Was there a hospital she went to, you mean, or to those people's house?
Just to their house.
house,
This woman
I
did
see.
that. She took people in.
Oh, she was a midwife
Mhm,
type.
a midwife type. So
How long did she stay there then with the baby? A while?
yeah, because they used to make them stay
In bed for 10
for
days?
10 days.
Yeah.
Isn't that just awful?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was so surprised one time when I was going to Markey School at that time, and these people bought some land, and it backed up to the schoolyard, and we had to go right past the corner of their land to go to school,
Mhm.
because we lived over beyond them, and they had quite a family, and she went out and worked in the garden or something, or else was helping with the cutting timber. She went home and had this baby and went right back out, and
Wow.
isn't that something,
Yeah.
Well, their name was G'day.
Oh.
You may have heard that name
Mhm.
around
We
here.
knew- Yeah, we knew some today.
Because there was
I had a store for a while.
and good people, but they were they had came into Michigan, different nationalities, and that's how we
Sure.
got these people here.
Sure.
And so that was their way,
So
We-
after Bill was born, you went back to Mickelson?
Yeah. Let's see, what was that?
In 1927. And then in December to Merritt, it said.
Oh, we went to Mickelson. We went there because we could find living quarters, and at that time, my father was.
So he had finished the work up in Lovell.
Mhm.
Okay.
And but they were buying. This man was buying the boughs of cedar boughs,
Oh.
and they used them for a funeral carpet
Oh.
in the where they put the tent up,
Mhm.
and they put this funeral carpet on the ground, and this was those cedar boughs. And my father, I used to go with him, and he'd cut the boughs, and I would stack them, and they were
Oh.
the boughs, the bundles were 25 pounds of these boughs, and I've forgotten what he got for them. I don't know what he got for them, but I used to go with him and stack them, and then we'd tie them up with twine, and put them into the car and haul them back to Mickelson. I don't remember who bought them. I can't remember.
Uh-huh. Oh, that was really neat, though. You were a hard worker, weren't you?
I've always
Well, you still are.
I've always worked, and I think
Sure.
I think it's been very good for me. I think it's very good for anyone
Oh,
work.
sure.
And I've always had to help my mother, and I learned so much from her. She was a perfectionist, and
Made you do it correctly.
you better do it right, or else you did it over, you know.
Mhm. So when he went, then what happened that he went to Merritt? That you moved to Merritt?
Oh, he was hired by a man to, we could live at the place at Merritt, and there was stock there that had to be looked after. They were fenced in and they had to be fed, you know, like that, and looked after water and everything. So we went there and lived, and I had I think 2 or 3 years of high school, and there was no high school. There was regular school up to 8th, 9th grade, you know, or like that, but no more high school. I'd have to go to Lake City, so, and we were pea poor.
Mhm. Sure.
So you just had to do what you could afford. So,
So it says in 28 and 29, you were at Merritt School?
I did go to Merritt School too, that's right, because I was going there, and we had 2 rooms, and we had it divided. The one room was school to the 8th grade. No, that was to the 6th grade, I think. And then the rest of us all were in this other room, and we had a man teacher, and he taught, I think he taught six grades. I know we had history and English, and everybody that hadn't had the class, we were all in that one class,
Oh,
and so that he could handle the classes that way. And it was very good for us, I think, because we learned a lot from each other,
sure.
and different.
Do you remember his name?
Isn't that something?
I shouldn't ask you, and then you could have said it.
I think his last name was Lee,
Oh,
but I
okay.
can't remember his first name. And he was an awfully good teacher. And one day,
Then did that finish your high school?
Mhm.
Well, you were able to take the test?
yeah,
Or?
because I had arthritis in my left leg, and I had to go on crutches
You did?
almost a year, and so I thought that finished. I didn't know that tuition was paid for us until we were 21, you know,
Oh.
and so I didn't know that, and I didn't go back to school. So I got through the 11th grade, and that's all I had. They were, and at the time I went to Merritt School, with us divided like that, they finally were consolidated with another school so that they could have more buildings and proper teachers and everything. So it was interesting.
So you finished the 11th grade qualifications at Merritt, and that was, you didn't go anyplace else after that?
No.
Then, how soon after that were you married? Where did you meet this Mr. Auldrich then? You said you didn't, that when you were at the camp, that wasn't
No,
when?
they weren't. I don't know. I guess probably he was. See, when he was 13, he ran away from home because his mother had married. His own mother had died, and his father had married another woman, and she had made brags that she was going to break him of drinking, because that was one of the things Mr. Auldrich did with great taste. Anyway, they had an awful time. They fought like cats and dogs, and she was, of course, it wasn't her job to cut wood, but you know, she had all the food on the stove to be cooked, no fire in the stove, nothing cooked. And the men came in for their dinner. And she spouted because there was no fire, or he spouted because there was no fire, and she spouted because there was no wood. So they had a grand time again.
Dear.
Can you imagine?
No.
So he ran away when he was 13 because it was just so bad. And he went into the lumber camps, and of course there was nothing for him to do because he was a skinny run of a kid, you know. And so I think there was a scaler that used to come to the camps and scale the timber, you know, before it went to the mill.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, well, come on, because he knew these people that lived in Mickelson that had a home and had family there, you know, and took him to them, and I can't say their name, and I wish I could. Anyway,
They took him in, huh?
they took him in, and here he was, a kid 14, he's driving a car to Lake City. He was driving taxi for this man.
Really?
Can you imagine?
Heaven's sake.
So, but I didn't meet him until we were older. Or he was older and I was both older. He'd been working. He'd been working in Flint, in the auto factories,
Oh.
and he would come up here for his vacation, and I was working.
Because he had family up here, though.
Yeah, his
Brothers and sisters or
Mhm.
whatever.
And his-
aunts and uncles.
and his foster or
Stepmother.
stepmother.
Mhm.
And of course, the big farm was there. Anyway, she had, after she left Mr. Auldrich, why she'd had a little building built down at Houghton Lake, at what they called Hammond View, and she started a little store there.
Oh.
And that's how she supported herself and the two boys. Of course, she tried to get alimony from him too.
Mhm.
And
Did he ever stop the drinking? No.
They came over one time when my mother and dad lived at the Tracy place. Mr. Auldrich was so bad with emphysema,
Oh.
you know, from drinking and smoking, and they wanted asked my mother and father if he could come there and they'd board and room him, you know. My mother said no way. She was death on drinking, you know. So
So where did you meet?
so I met Cecil. We were living in Mickelson. That was that last time I think we moved back there.
Mhm.
And well, no. He came up from I was working at the telephone office, and he came up from Flint, and he was going to go out to Mother Auldrich's, and we lived out that way. So my brother would come and get me from the telephone office with the old car that we had, and so we asked him if he wanted to ride, and of course he did. So he rode out with us, and of course Dad asked him to stay for supper because it was supper time when we got home. So that was when I met him, and
Was it love at first sight? I have to ask.
I think it was.
I think it was.
I think it was.
That's nice.
He was an awfully good man. I liked him so much.
Well, I hope so.
Yes, because I had a flock of kids.
Yeah. When had you started working I assume you mean the telephone office in Roscommon?
I started in, I think I was,
1930, maybe? That's July telephone office.
I think that must have been it then. And
Who bought the house that year? Summer bought house.
Oh, that was the house where my mother lived. Of course, it's not there now because they thought the property would sell, some of the family, and they tore the house down and everything. Of course, it had been an old store building, and my father had fixed it, so it was, took the, they had kind of built-in places, so they could put stuff in the window, food and stuff for sale. And my father fixed it and added, made a higher roof on it so that we could have bedrooms upstairs.
So your whole family lived
So
in
we
that
all
house?
lived there.
Uh-huh.
And
I remember on County Road 100.
Mhm.
It was a darling little place, right on the road.
right on the road.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I always liked it.
And she did laundry. You know, the yard used to be full of clothes on the oak tree, the lines from oak tree to oak tree, you know,
Right on.
just scads of them. We used to do sheets for some of the hotels.
Oh.
And we had what we call a mangle,
Mhm.
and I used to mangle sheets.
Oh, my goodness.
My arms almost, I could do a shirt in 4 minutes on that
Oh.
mangle. And it looked just like it had been done by hand because I knew how to
good
work
you
it.
were.
Hmm.
Wonderful.
It was just
So
wonderful.
you helped your mother with that
Oh,
also?
yes, I did. I used to walk up from Marl Lake and help her because,
Even after you were married, you mean?
mhm.
Okay, well, you were still single when you started working at the telephone
Mhm,
office,
mhm.
because then you first met.
Yeah, I was-
so. How long, was that a full-time job for you, 5 days a week?
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And I worked a lot of, as I got older, and even after I was married, I worked at the telephone office. I worked nights
Oh.
as a relief operator, so that because it was hard for people to